the first Sunday of the month, and you know what that means? That's right, it's the patron pick. And the patrons have selected Claydol, the Claydol Pokemon. Yeah, that's what it says in the Pokedex, so okay, whatever. This mysterious doll Pokemon is quite ancient, with Pokedex entries detailing how humans shaped its form from mud and clay over 20,000 years ago with a mysterious ray of light that then gave it life. But of course, today we'll be examining how the doll spun in the competitive scene. So, how good was Claydol actually? And in this video, we'll be going over these competitive formats. Claydol is a hugely important Pokemon in its debut generation. The sheer power of Sandstorm and Spikes is well known, but Claydol is a rapid spinner that is immune to both. Furthermore, it has Stab Psychic to obliterate the OU tier spin blocker Gengar, and doesn't fear its ice punches thanks to its tremendous special bulk, which also allows it to assist against Pokemon such as Jirachi, Zapdos, and mixed Salamence. It staves off both Earthquake and Rock Slide, also known as Quake Slide, which was crucial for Pokemon like Tyranitar, Aerodactyl, and Flygon, even packing Ice Beam for the latter two, as well as Salamence. However, sometimes it preferred to leave those to a teammate so it could run Explosion as a catch-all move against Pokemon like Celebi and Zapdos. And as for teammates, alongside Claydol, Skarmory resists every physical type in the game, which is crucial for powerful Choice Banded attacks. Basically, Claydol's role was to relieve Spike's pressure for his team, while also checking some dangerous Pokemon. However, Claydol did have its share of downsides. The primary complaint is that Claydol is not very strong. Now, defensive Pokemon don't need to be offensive juggernauts, but sometimes it impedes Claydol's ability to hold things off and illustrates the necessity of it being a backup check to threats rather than a hard counter. The best example of this is when it goes toe-to-toe with Dragon Dance Tyranitar or Calm Mind Jirachi and can only 3-hit KO with Earthquake while it's battered with attacks in return. This leads to another issue. While Claydol is quite bulky and it won't be getting worn down by Sandstorm and Spikes, its HP stat just isn't that great, and it struggles to take repeated hits like Aerodactyl's Double Edge. Thus, Claydol is commonly paired with Suicune, who is much harder to take down without Spikes, letting it help out on defense while also becoming a greater offensive threat since it can more easily calm mind. However, things aren't always so easy for Claydol on the Spike front either. When Skarmory commonly ran Rest Talk, Claydol had nothing to fear, but eventually Toxic Protect became the main set for Skarmory, and that meant a slow death while Skarmory laid down Spikes to its heart's content. Teams with Claydol generally don't tend to hit Skarmory hard enough, so this would get messy very quickly. Thus, adaptations came up in two forms. First, the pairing of Magneton with Claydol, so that Skarmory was no longer a factor and that Spikes would be permanently gone. While the two didn't cover too much defensively together, the power of Snorlax and Suicune without Spikes was undeniable, and thus those teams had some success. Though some players have accused these teams of being attempts at automatic wins, as well as quarter-cutting team building. For example, their slow nature and inability to do much damage without boosting first left them absolutely ripped apart by Heracross. The second adaptation was when Claydol decided to free up a team slot in exchange for a move slot and began to eschew its last move for Refresh, shrugging off Skarmory's Toxic and completely blanking it, bringing the game to a standstill when these teams so commonly relied on Spikes to get their offense going was advantageous for the Claydol user. But of course, Skarmory adapted back. The move Taunt, a useful tool for other Skarmory, would shut down Refresh, but it also only lasted one turn, so Claydol was not completely out of the water. Drill Pick, which was used for Gengar switch-ins and Focus Punch Heracross, would slowly wear down Claydol, but the lack of Toxic made life easier for Zapdos, Suicune, and Tyranitar. The concessions Skarmory made for this new era of Claydol made it easier to deal with than the fearsome Toxic Protect set of old, and that was enough. Some players even used Adamant Claydol. Usually it ran a minus speed nature, either Sassy or Relax, but even with minus special attack, it still 2-hit KO'd Gengar, and the extra speed and power was crucial for Pursuit Tyranitar. Often these teams' only way of forcing damage on Claydol. Hitting Jirachi much harder was welcome as well, as Claydol's natural bulk was often enough to take most of what it needed to. So as you can see, Claydol's seen some evolution over the years even in just Gen 3, but what hasn't changed is its completely unique role as the Sand and Spike immune spinner, and it's because of this, Claydol is a definitive part of Advanced OU. Claydol instantly dropped out of OU in Gen 4. Thanks to the physical special split, there are now more moves that Claydol just really doesn't like, such as Physical Crunch and Pursuit, and U-Turn was everywhere, which meant that it couldn't handle its old targets, like Tyranitar and Flygon, and it didn't do well against new threats like Lucario and Heatran. And as a result, Claydol dropped to underused, but even there it was a mixed bag. In terms of new ghosts to block Rapid Spin, Rotom and Mismagius were tough, and Spiritomb was tougher, both in defenses and because it packed Pursuit. Pursuit. However, Claydol could at least Shadow Ball the first two, and it also had some new Pursuit-happy partners, such as Houndoom, Drapion, and of course, Spiritomb. Claydol's main appeal was that it absolutely sat on the common Stealth Rock setters like Registeel, Donphan, and Uxie. However, its resistances were otherwise not too useful in UU. Eating Rhyperior's Stab, Earthquake, and Stone Edge combination was nice, but it just get Mega Horned into oblivion. It could take a stray hit from strong fire types, but usually just one, and it didn't do well at all against their omnipresent water and grass partners that were also among the best Pokemon in the metagame. Overall, Claydol had its perks, but all too often it just didn't fulfill any specifically important defensive niches, and could very easily go wrong, despite its positive traits. But before we move on from Gen 4, it's worth mentioning that Claydol had a brief appearance in Ubers, since it completely dominates Stealth Rock Groudon, while also threatening the work of Lead Deoxys speed. With Toxic, Giratina Origin would be put on a timer, allowing Claydol to spin later. It was incredibly niche, but it had a brief moment in the spotlight, as top Uber players everywhere were highly frustrated by its ability to so effortlessly mess with them. If Gen 4 OU was overwhelming for Claydol, it was nothing compared to Gen 5. Permanent Rain, Dragons, Ferrothorn, and Jellicent, yikes. Some people tried it because it was one of the few Pokemon to resist the terrifying Terrakion Stab combination, but then Terrakion just used X-Scissor and that was that. And unfortunately, UU wasn't much better, as it went from average-ish to outright mediocre. Despite the outbreak of fighting types, it was really only good against Cobalion. Mienshao U-turn, Scrafty would Dragon Dance and Crunch, and you can forget about Heracross. The amazing new Cofagrigus also completely destroyed it, turning its spin attempts into free Nasty Plot Trick Room setups. Also, Claydol wasn't getting past Prankster Sableye anytime soon. Claydol is just not good against pummeling offense due to its lack of recovery and useful resistances. Despite its electric immunity, it will lose to a Raikou that calm-minded on the Switch, and it struggles to do anything of note to Zapdos. It even invites Cofagrigus for offensive pressure. It's not good against Hazard stacking Stall despite its immunity to Spikes and Toxic Spikes. It's so weak that it's almost welcomed in Team Preview, as it invites in Sableye to mess with its team unopposed. Sadly, Claydol simply didn't match up well against the metagame, and was probably a better candidate for RU. And instead of jumping down another step, Claydol slipped and tumbled into NU in Gen 6. It absolutely hated the buff knockoff and was forced into using Culber Berry to compensate. Even with leftovers, Claydol didn't have the recovery or HP stat needed to be a truly effective stopgap against the metagame's threats, but it barely ebbed out a niche thanks to the power of Rapid Spin. Being able to remove the opponent's hazards while keeping one's own was a luxury when one was used to having to concede their own hazards via defog, and removing hazards was important to facilitate dangerous Pokemon like Scyther. Claydol was best utilized by fully focusing on speed and special attack, and since it wasn't going to be safely walling much, it ditched Stealth Rock and fully embraced this role as an offensive spinner, which opened up possibilities. A maxed out Shadow Ball hit Mismagius, Rotom, and Gourgeist pretty hard, while Earth Power trucked common hazard setters in Rhydon, Garbodor, and Regirock. The speed complemented this well against most of the middling NU metagame, allowing it to spin before getting picked off by Pokemon like Exeggutor, and if it was running Timid, Neutral Speed, Magmortar, and Hitmonchan. It wasn't Elmer's glue, but it did its job well enough to facilitate some teams that otherwise crumble to hazards. Gen 7 saw Claydol drop once more to the lowest tier for a fully evolved Pokemon, PU. But sadly, even here, with the lowest of the low, it struggled with superior competition. Alolan Sandslash also boasted Stealth Rock and Rapid Spin while having far superior defensive typing for the tier, letting it take on relevant threats like Oricorio G and Aurorus, while, unlike Claydol, not being pursued by Skuntank, and also unlike Claydol, being able to plow through Frostlass, attempting to spin block thanks to a stab Ironhead. Claydol had the admittingly nice ability to handle Lycanroc while being able to prevent Manectric from gaining momentum with Volt Switch, but this paled in comparison to the overall superiority of Alolan Sandslash. It's just tough to establish a niche when your direct competition is one of the best in the tier. And that's it. So how good was Claydol actually? Well, its debut generation saw it as an integral part of the OU metagame, and there's no doubt about that. It's a fantastic Pokemon in Gen 3. And after that, it pretty much plummeted. It was a victim of power creep and was unable to find much more than a semblance of a niche in progressively lower tiers. And there it was a rare sight because of how rarely it was genuinely the best Pokemon for the job. Its stats and typing just held it back too much, which speaks volumes considering how desirable some of those attributes are. And I'm sure you've been wondering wondering through this video, what about VGC? Well, we found no notable placements for Claydol, and this is probably because, well, they're better Trick Room setters and because Rapid Spin isn't used in VGC, like at all. And Claydol doesn't do much of anything else. But at least any Gen 3 OU player will tell you about how back in the day Claydol was super important for that tier. Thanks for watching, everyone, and as always, if you liked the video and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to False Swipe Gaming for more weekly Pokemon content. And for the comments, I want to know, what do you think about competitive Claydol? Would you want it to come back to its Gen 3 OU status someday, or do you think it's fine the way it is? Whatever it is, let me know in the comments. And as for voting for the next Pokemon, I did promise 2 giant weather Pokemon for this month, and also a Gen 1 OU Pokemon, so stay tuned for that as there's no voting for this week. And also big shout outs to the patrons for continued support of our videos, and of course for voting for this Pokemon. And follow my crew on these social media platforms. And that's all I got. See you next time, everyone.